Beyond the Gates spoilers for Thursday, July 17th, tease that Bill is ready for a new kind of action. The tension has been simmering for weeks, but this time, it's no longer about words, warnings, or vague threats. Bill wants Kenny dead. After everything Kenny has done, the manipulation, the blackmail, the constant harassment, Bill has had enough. He's not just thinking about confrontation. He wants to be the one to end Kenny's life with his own hands. The need for justice, or perhaps vengeance, is consuming him. But Vernon sees where this is going. He steps in at the last moment, knowing what would come next if Bill acts on his impulse. If Bill kills Kenny, he will undoubtedly be caught. Vernon knows the system, the politics, the power plays. Bill might satisfy his rage, but he'd lose everything: his freedom, his legacy, maybe even his family. Vernon can't allow that. Not when there might still be another way to neutralize Kenny without drawing blood. Vernon returns to a dark corner of his mind, one he thought he left behind. He considers once again paying Kenny off. A large sum. Enough to buy silence, at least temporarily. He tells himself it's a strategic decision, a move made in the name of peace. But deep down, Vernon knows it's a cowardly path. Buying off the devil doesn't make him go away. It just feeds his hunger. And Kenny? He's insatiable. Vernon knows the man. Money only sharpens Kenny's greed. Kenny, emboldened by previous payouts, shifts his focus. He realizes there's more leverage to gain, more power to hold. So he targets Martin's children. It's a chilling escalation. No longer content with extorting the older generation, Kenny wants to drag the next one into his sick game. He stalks, harasses, and threatens them subtly at first, then with increasing boldness. Phone calls in the night. Anonymous notes left at school. A shadow seen across the street. He wants the kids scared. He wants Martin and Vernon to feel helpless. Martin reaches his breaking point. Kenny has crossed an unforgivable line. He's no longer a nuisance or a blackmailer. He's a predator. The father in Martin can't stay calm. Unlike Vernon, who still clings to law and order, Martin is driven by a raw protective instinct. He wants Kenny dead too, just like Bill. But his rage is colder, more calculating. He doesn't want revenge. He wants to end a threat. Bill decides to go around Vernon. He knows Vernon won't agree, so he keeps it quiet. Through an old contact, he hires a private detective named Marcel Malone. But Malone isn't just any investigator. He's a fixer, the kind of man who solves problems permanently. Bill's instructions are clear. Get rid of Kenny. Make it look clean, accidental. No traces. No loose ends. Bill's done waiting. This is justice now in his eyes. Malone accepts the job without flinching. He's handled worse. He begins tracking Kenny's movements, his routines, his weaknesses. He studies Kenny like a hunter stalks prey. He knows Kenny is smart, paranoid even. But he also knows Kenny's ego is his blind spot. Malone plans to use that. Meanwhile, Randy Parker's name starts bubbling up again. The police can't shake his past, specifically the fact that he once tried to kill Kenny and failed. The history is all there in the case files. Randy had motive, rage, and opportunity. So when Kenny's life suddenly ends in a brutal yet mysterious manner, the cops instantly turn their spotlight on Randy. It fits their narrative. It saves them time. But the truth is messy. Randy didn't kill Kenny this time. Malone did. Clean. Precise. Efficient. But the police don't know that. And Malone has no intention of stepping forward. He's not paid for confessions. He's paid for silence and success. Anita returns into the storm. She's been gone for years, trying to rebuild her life away from the chaos. But something pulls her back. She hears whispers, sees strange news clippings. When she finally steps foot into Martin's house again, everything feels wrong. The warmth is gone. The family is fractured. And she's furious. Anita's anger isn't just directed at the outside world. It's focused squarely at her husband. The man she trusted to protect their children, their name, their peace. Instead, she finds secrets, danger, and scars. The confrontation is bitter. She demands answers, throws accusations like daggers. Her voice shakes with betrayal. But her husband deflects, dodges, refuses to give straight answers. The walls between them have never been higher. Then there's Nicole Richardson. She tries to play innocent, act like she's outside all of this. She says she doesn't know what happened to Kenny. She denies involvement, denies even awareness. But her face twitches when questioned. She knows more than she says. Nicole has always been a survivor. She's not above lying to stay safe. The past keeps creeping back in. Especially Martin's past. Anita brings it up during one of their endless arguments. She reminds him of what happened 2 years ago, how things began falling apart. At the center of that story, like a cancer, was Kenny. Kenny who humiliated everyone. Kenny who mocked Martin, insulted Anita, terrorized their friends. And worse, Kenny who made his racism a weapon. He wasn't just cruel, he was strategic. He used slurs like poison. Made gatherings unbearable. Shattered reputations with just a few whispered words. He turned community members against each other. Ripped up friendships, created suspicion, left chaos in his wake. That's why, back then, so many people wanted Kenny gone. Permanently. Now, even in death, Kenny still has power. His murder should have brought peace, but it only creates more fear. With Randy under investigation, everyone's looking over their shoulder. Secrets threaten to boil over. And Vernon? He watches everything with haunted eyes. He knows they've crossed a line, even if they did it to stop a monster. And he wonders, what kind of men are they now? The darkness isn't gone. It's just changed shape. And Kenny, even in the grave, is still pulling strings. The investigation into Kenny's death intensifies. Detectives revisit old leads. Reopen files. Interview people from 2 years ago. And slowly, inconsistencies begin to appear. One name keeps coming up, Marcel Malone. Not in the police reports, but in whispers. People who saw him near Kenny's last known location. People who remembered him from past jobs. But nothing concrete. No proof. Meanwhile, Anita tries to make sense of the wreckage. She begins her own quiet inquiry, asking questions that no one wants to answer. She feels like the only one still chasing truth. But even she doesn't realize how deep the rot goes. The lies. The bargains. The body count. The cracks keep spreading. Martin can't sleep. Vernon drinks more. Bill grows paranoid. And Nicole? She disappears for days at a time, always returning with new stories. No one trusts each other anymore. And in the background, a new player enters the game. Someone who knows what really happened. Someone who saw Malone the night of the murder. Someone who wants something in return. The game isn't over. Not by a long shot. Everything's about to burn. Bill's rage hadn't disappeared after Kenny's death. It mutated. The idea that someone else had killed Kenny should have satisfied him, but it didn't. There was no closure in silence. He needed to look the man in the eye and take that life himself. Marcel Malone had stolen that from him. Worse yet, the world now believed Randy Parker had done it. And Bill, for all his fire and fury, couldn't speak a word. Vernon made sure of that. Vernon, always the orchestrator, tried to pull strings tighter. He warned Bill to stay quiet and insisted that the outcome mattered more than the method. Kenny was gone. That was what counted. But Vernon had made a mistake. Kenny's death didn't erase the threat. It ignited new ones. The man who had witnessed Marcel kill Kenny hadn't stepped forward yet, but he was circling. His name was never officially tied to the old feud, but he'd once worked security at a property owned by Martin. A quiet figure named Elliot Graves. He held receipts. Surveillance tapes. Conversations he wasn't supposed to overhear. And now he wanted something more valuable than money. Elliot approached Nicole Richardson first. He knew she had connection friends in politics, media contacts. She'd always been slippery, always managed to slide out from under pressure. Elliot figured she might be desperate enough to bargain. He was right. Nicole panicked when she saw what Elliot had. Video evidence. Audio clips. enough to unravel every story they'd carefully built. She tried to stall him. She offered contacts, distractions, even legal help. But Elliot didn't want that. He wanted immunity. He wanted leverage. He wanted his name erased from everything. Anita, still digging through old files and phone records, stumbled across a string of deleted voicemails left by Kenny. Threats, half-laughs, cryptic comments about her husband and Nicole. One line stood out: "They'll never believe you, Anita." They never did before. It stuck in her mind like a thorn. There had been moments, years ago, when she had tried to speak out about Kenny's abuse, about Martin's silence, about the passive complicity of everyone involved. But no one listened then. Now, with Kenny dead, she saw a chance to finally be heard. Or at least, to drag the truth into the light. Martin was crumbling. The weight of years of cover-ups, bribes, backroom deals, and emotional wreckage bore down on him like never before. His children were being followed again. Not by Kenny, obviously, but by whoever now wanted control of the narrative. Someone knew that Kenny had died under suspicious circumstances. Someone wanted Martin silenced. He started receiving photos of his kids, clips of old emails, even the burner phone Bill had used to contact Malone. Someone had found it. And Randy Parker, meanwhile, was collapsing under public scrutiny. The police interrogations intensified. His alibis were questioned. The old attempt on Kenny's life was used as a template to connect him to the current crime. Randy's lawyer grew increasingly frustrated as every lead they brought forward was buried by a louder one implicating Randy. No one was talking about Marcel Malone. Marcel, for his part, had vanished. He knew how to disappear. He left no paper trail, no digital footprint, no casual witnesses. The only thing Marcel left behind was chaos. And that's what made him more dangerous than Kenny Everwash. Had no agenda. He was a professional. He'd kill again if the money was right. Bill began hunting for Marcel in secret. He used back channels, old army buddies, names Vernon had once scribbled in a notebook but never intended to activate. Bill didn't want to expose Marcel. He wanted to kill him. He still needed blood. This time, not for revenge, but to erase a witness. Bill realized what Vernon had not: Marcel's silence couldn't be bought forever. Someone somewhere would find him. And when they did, the truth would bury them all. Nicole was unraveling. Elliot's threats had grown more direct. He wanted her to arrange a meeting with Martin and Vernon face to face. He said he'd reveal the evidence there and let them make a decision: go public or pay for permanent silence. Nicole hesitated, knowing whatever decision she made would end her career. She chose survival. She set the meeting. The confrontation took place at an abandoned hotel outside of town, neutral ground. Vernon, Martin, and Nicole walked in with grim faces. Elliot was already there. He didn't flinch. He presented the files: a USB drive with footage of Marcel walking out of the alley where Kenny died, a voicemail between Bill and Malone, grainy surveillance of Vernon wiring money to a shadow account. It was all damning. Vernon took the drive without blinking. Then he pulled a gun. Martin shouted. Nicole froze. Elliot just smiled. "You think I didn't prepare for this?" Elliot said. There was another man outside. Recording. Watching. If Elliot didn't walk out, the footage would be sent to law enforcement and the press. Vernon lowered the gun. Martin, for once, took control. He offered a counterdeal: a new identity, relocation, offshore funds. Elliot laughed, but agreed to consider it. They had 3 days. Anita found out about the meeting. Nicole tried to lie, of course, but Anita had already accessed Nicole's private calendar. She confronted Martin that night, and something broke between them. Martin, exhausted and guilty, confessed everything: the cover-up, Bill's involvement, the hit on Kenny, and even Marcel's name. Anita didn't scream. She didn't cry. She packed a bag. But she didn't leave town. She went to the police. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind. Randy Parker was released without charges. The real killer was declared to be unknown, but privately, detectives began following the money. Vernon's offshore accounts were flagged. Martin's property was searched. Nicole's emails were subpoenaed. And Bill? Bill was nowhere to be found. He had tracked Marcel Malone to a safe house in the mountains. Alone. Armed. The confrontation was ugly, fast, and quiet. No witnesses. Only two men with old guilt and new rage. Bill shot first. Marcel returned fire. Both were hit. Bill survived. Marcel didn't. With Marcel's death, the last thread began to unravel. Elliot vanished again, now likely with everything he needed to disappear permanently. Nicole resigned from public life, claiming illness. Martin's children were sent abroad for safety. Vernon was indicted but released on bail. The trial was looming. Anita remained. She gave interviews, wrote articles, held rallies. She became the face of a movement against systemic silence. For the first time, her voice echoed louder than all of theirs combined. But peace was still far off. The darkness that Kenny embodied had seeped into every part of their lives. Killing him hadn't cleansed them. It had only revealed how much rot was already there. The alliances they once relied on had crumbled. Their secrets were no longer buried deep. Everyone had blood on their hands. And justice? It was still being negotiated in quiet rooms, with quieter threats. The gates were never just metaphorical. They were built to keep certain truths locked away. But now, they stood wide open. And no one was safe on the other side. The story didn't end when the bodies fell, or when the police walked away. It didn't end when the cameras turned to other scandals, or when Martin's family tried to resume something resembling normal. Because the damage Kenny had inflicted wasn't isolated to any single act. He had fractured people at the core, and the ripple effects were still moving outward. Randy Parker, finally free, refused to go quietly. He wanted his name cleared, not just released. With the help of Anita, he filed a civil suit against the city and police department. The lawsuit included a subpoena for Vernon, Martin, and even Bill, forcing everything back into the public arena. The media couldn't ignore it. Anita, already in the spotlight, leaned into it. She didn't do it for fame. She did it for the truth that had been suppressed for far too long. But the trial unearthed more than anyone expected. Financial records tied Vernon and Martin to other payouts in previous year cases involving racial intimidation, coercion, and even obstruction of justice. Kenny had been just one node in a larger web. A fixer, yes, but also a weapon used by men who didn't want to get their own hands dirty. Anita's articles started to hint at these connections, and suddenly people who had once stood by Vernon and Martin began distancing themselves. Martin faced an internal breakdown. His children, now overseas, refused to take his calls. His wife wouldn't return. His wealth didn't matter anymore. The community that once welcomed him with open arms began whispering behind his back. He thought removing Kenny would solve his problems, but all it had done was remove the buffer hiding them. Bill recovered from his injuries, but he would never be the same. He moved like a man carrying too much. Vernon urged him to keep quiet, but Bill started speaking anonymously to a journalist investigating the story. He wanted to rewrite his legacy. Maybe guilt drove him, or maybe it was his way of clinging to control. Either way, he became a leak that Vernon couldn't plug. And Vernon, always the strategist, finally ran out of moves. A grand jury indicted him on charges related to obstruction, illegal payments, and conspiracy. His empire, built on quiet deals and calculated silence, began to crumble. As his trial approached, his allies turned to enemies, and the networks he once manipulated stopped taking his calls. He sat in his office alone, watching everything unravel. Nicole Richardson disappeared from the public entirely. No press releases. No final statements. One day, she simply left. Some said she moved abroad. Others believed she paid someone to erase her entirely. But she was gone, and with her, the last flimsy mask of legitimacy the group had clung to. The real ending wasn't cinematic. There were no fiery showdowns or last-minute confessions. It came slowly, like a tide rising until you look down and realize you're drowning. People began talking again, neighbors who had kept their heads down, victims who had stayed silent, old employees of Martin's firm who remembered things they hadn't dared say. Kenny's death had unlocked something that couldn't be shut again. And through it all, Anita remained. She stood at rallies. She gave interviews. She sat in courtrooms, watching men who once dismissed her now squirm under questioning. She became a quiet icon of reckoning. Not because she was perfect, but because she had survived and refused to shut up. The last twist came from an unexpected direction. A reporter unearthed one of Marcel Malone's old safe deposit boxes. Inside was a journal, part ledger, part diary. In it, Malone had documented every job, every target, every employer. He didn't name names directly, but the details were damning enough. He wrote about the man with the gravel voice, Bill, the woman with the lawyer's smile, Nicole, the one who pays in envelopes with no return address, Vernon. The journal went public. It made headlines. It sealed Vernon's conviction. Martin negotiated a plea deal and quietly left the city. Bill, who had avoided criminal charges, chose self-imposed exile in a remote property, away from media and memory. But the journal also offered one last mystery. On the final page, Malone had written a single line. They were never the only ones. What that meant became a story of its own. Conspiracy theorists latched on. Investigators reopened dormant cases. A deeper rot was suspected, one far beyond Kenny, far beyond Vernon and Martin. The Gates hadn't just held back one monster. They had hidden an entire network of corruption, racism, manipulation, and sanctioned violence. Anita, looking at the journal under police supervision, felt no satisfaction. Just exhaustion. And a quiet resolve. There was still more to uncover. But she would be ready.